man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while. When will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This old world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right. Welcome, everybody. On the 4th of July, we are going to talk about nation. What is a nation? How do we understand this concept? And I just last minute preps. It's been a very long week, unfortunately. But I'm here now doing the stream. And maybe there's even people watching. Who knows? I've got my Sampel. I hope you do as well, or some similar drink. And of course, we've got the Muppet Cup. Everybody should have a Muppet Cup. You should be able to buy one in my store. If you don't have one, it's to remind you that you're a Muppet, because you are important. And I have some tea brewing over there, but it's got a lid on it because it has to brew special. So Polly's here. She's, hanging out. She's a little sleepy. She's had a hard week too. But sit up, Polly. Sit up. She's not sitting up. That's all right. She'll be fine. Birds can hang at odd angles. So, yeah, this is going to be fun. We're going to start out with a little reading from our favorite book here, which is a nice little book of aphorisms. And we'll see what we get for Nation on the 4th of July. This is in Robustness and Fragility. Passionate hate by nations and individuals. Random, guys, random. Ends by rotation to another subject of hate. Mediocrity cannot handle more than one enemy. That's true. This makes warring statelings with shifting alliances and enmities a robust system. Right. Yeah, that's true. Passionate hate by nations and individuals ends by rotation to another subject of hate. Mediocrity cannot handle more than one enemy. This makes warring statelings with shifting alliances and enmities a robust system. Yes, indeed, it does. Taleb to the rescue. I don't know how these things happen, but they happen. So Taleb's talking about nations too. Chosen totally at random because I'm not smart enough to do this all in advance. Happy 4th of July for those in the U.S. who celebrate sort of the birth of our nation, which it most certainly is not. And that's what we're going to get into. Boy, how to start? I think the problem with the word nation is that it's a very odd term. It got broken by the existence of the United States, but previously has a very clear definition. And this is more about the split. I've talked about this in my history videos, particularly in the Frontier of Ideas, but there's a big split between how the other places in the world think about things and how the United States in particular, not North America, but the United States thinks about things, all the way down to what we would call the philosophical, right? So there's continental philosophy. We don't have continental philosophy, thank goodness for that. But what does definition mean? What does nation mean? Like, what's the definition? And how do we get here? How do we get to this land of confusion, if you will? Well, this word has an interesting history. And the recent panic over nationalism, which is something we all share. We all share having a nation. Sorry, we're all nationalists in that way, is an indication of a huge problem in our world today. Like when we're like, oh no, nationalism, like, but everyone's in a nation. Like, I don't understand what you're saying. You're kind of a crazy person. And I know this is obviously part of this, aside from 4th of July, comes from the discussion. I know I released part 1, part 2 is coming out probably tomorrow. That I did my reaction video with Brett Weinstein and James Lindsay. They're both insane. James is more wrong, but that's okay. He doesn't care. He's losing friends left and right. When you lose friends, by the way, apparently that's called canceling. Don't do bad things, and you want a bad consequences. How's that? But the real question is, how do we understand this? So in the book American Nations, Colin Woodard views the United States as a federation of 11 nations, or not the United States, but North America. I think there are 7 or 8 in the United States. So it's a federation of nations, and it's each of those nations is defined by the culture established by its founding population, right? And these nations include regions like Yankeedom, Deep South, Midlands, El Norte, among others, right? And that challenges the conception of having a single identity, right? So what is the original definition of nation? Well, it's 1300s, a nation, a race of people, large group of people with common ancestry and language, right? That's from the Old French: birth, rank, descendants, relatives, country, homeland, right? And directly from the Latin nationem, the nominative of natio: birth, origin, breed, stock, kind, species, race of people, tribe, literally that which has been born. So the birth of a nation is your birth. You're born into a nation. And the people in that birth line could form a nation. That's basically what it says. And in the 1620s or thereabouts, peculiar to a common or whole people of a country. Right. But I think that's where the confusion comes from. Nations and countries aren't the same thing. And established and maintained by a nation or its laws, that's 1802. So we're already well on our way to destroying the definition, the original definition, which conformed to basically how you were born. And I think that's actually fantastically important to preserve. Is you're born into a nation, like everybody's born into a nation because it's part of your lineage and your heritage as a human being. And when you don't do that, I think you just get confusion and weird, unnecessary problems. So it's sort of worth asking, why the confusion? And it looks like I didn't do it because I'm lazy. I had the AI do a bunch of deep research on, very specific questions, which is how you have to handle the AI, by the way. I did some research on how the United States used this term nation. And immediately, I'm like, what's a nation according to the United States, sort of thing, right? And yeah, all I said was, I need to know all the uses of nation with respect to the United States. And it immediately pops up with the conceptual distinctions: nation versus state versus country versus homeland. Right, because we have a deep confusion between those 4 things. So our nation is comprised of states. And that doesn't actually work very well, as Colin Woodard points out in his book. And our states are about the size, population-wise and government-wise, as your average European country. Right. And so you start to see the problem. This is why the European Union exists rather explicitly, to compete with the United States from a trade and size perspective. So they wanted a monetary power or an economic power as big as the United States. That's why they formed the European Union. It's not the only reason, but it's the primary reason. It's in the charter, right? It's just that's why they did it. They wanted to be the United States. It's a poor copy. There's a governance on top of it, which probably didn't need to be there to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. But hey, they're Europeans. They don't understand what we're doing. Homeland is increasingly used in the US. So we have like a Department of Homeland Security, for example, right? And so it's more about a cultural or geographical area without governmental status, such as like wine country, which I think is funny, right? And of course, nations used all over the place because there's Red Sox Nation. Brilliant marketing move by the Boston Red Sox to start Red Sox Nation, recognizing that people from all around the United Federation that we call the United States, still love their sports team. That's because the Yankees can't stay in one place, so they move around a lot. That's a different live stream. The New England religion, or at least the obvious New England religion of sports. And I think, yeah, there's so much here. This is so rich. Just asking, a deep research Gemini, Google Gemini to do this is amazing. I think the problem is that the United States is seen as a sovereign political nation. And the way we got there effectively was by engaging in calling things national, and things like the Library of Congress, for example, right, was supposed to keep the national archives of books, for example. So things like that are what's causing the confusion, because, as Colin Woodard rightly points out, the people who migrated here and formed parts of the region that we now call the United States have very different cultures. And those cultures are distinct, and they don't go along state lines at all. They go along these weird regions. The Deep South, the Mid-Atlantic is very different, even though the Northerners consider it the South, right? They might even consider themselves the South. These are different areas populated by different peoples with a very different ethos. And if you travel enough around the United States, which is very hard, I just got back recently from 3 weeks driving all over the United States, right? Southwest South Dakota. We stopped in the Chicago area, well, Indianapolis area, actually. We went to a shrine in Wisconsin. And then we went and stopped in Pennsylvania, right on the Jersey line, so eastern Pennsylvania, and then finally Cape Cod. And then back down south. We always stop in the middle when we come back home. So when you do that, you get to experience a bunch of different places. And that really highlights this idea that what we call a nation is not one unified place with one unified ethos. And when you engage in that, it just changes how you think about things. So the United States, for example, is globally recognized as a sovereign political power, right? Because we have complete independence from external political authority. So that's absolute sovereignty, is one way to talk about that. And we have our own geographical boundaries, right? And that's wrapped up in the Treaty of Westphalia, actually, right, which establishes the principle of non-interference and equality among nations in the international legal framework. So this is an issue because we've warped the idea of what a nation is. And of course, on the 4th of July, I think the most appropriate thing you can talk about is, well, what is it about America that makes it America? And I think Colin Woodard, again, has it dead on here. Like, the thing is, we are a federation of nations with an identity as a federation of nations, of a bunch of cultures that have melted or melded together to form one political ruling system that sort of allows us our sovereignty. And it allows people who come here, hopefully legally, which there is a method to do, by the way, to partake in that sovereignty. Now, I would argue, as with all places, whether you want to call them countries or nations or states or whatever, you should adopt the culture of the region that you're in. One of the great points that Colin Woodard makes in American Nations is he says that one of the unique things about the United States is if you feel as though the way you were brought up does not suit your personality, you can go to some place that does and still be part of this United Federation of Nations under its protection. And what I'll note is that if you look into it, and most people don't, and fair enough, the states have vastly different laws, like really different. And they have different governmental structures. Massachusetts is a commonwealth. It's not a commonwealth down south, baby. It's totally different, right? Massachusetts is all set. The local governments are centered around the towns and cities, which are very large. There's a lot of people. You can't swing a cat in Massachusetts without hitting 1 million people. Down here, it's all county-based government. This is different. How they run things is different. And that's actually important. And I was on a stream earlier today on Grail Country. Thanks, Nate. He did a good job as always. And they were talking about liberalism and the idea of liberalism and where does it come from? Well, all that comes out of the milieu that built the United States. So the heading of the English king, you have to watch my history playlist to get that, right, on navigating patterns. It's there. Behead the king, destroy the hierarchy, wacky things start happening, right? There's basically a corporate takeover of the government in England by the East India Company. That's what forms Parliament. Basically, they take away the last vestiges of kingship, right? And they install their own sort of figurehead king, right? The colonies are caught up in that. Now, half of the colonies, 13 of them, rebel and say the king has betrayed us, which is technically and in all other ways completely correct. King of England betrayed his colonies. He's the one that formed and chartered and granted the colonies, not the Parliament. The Parliament wasn't even around. The Parliament didn't have that function back then anyway. And so he did not take care of the colonies that he founded. And that's a huge, huge, huge problem, right? It's a huge problem. So what ends up happening is they rebel. I don't like calling it a revolution. I think it was a rebellion. I think it was a successful rebellion, perhaps the only just and successful rebellion in history. That might be a little hyperbolic, but also pretty damn successful. We've had more or less the same form of government or governance over us for 250 years. That is probably a record, at least since the fall of the Roman Empire, if not before. There's an argument that could be made. I'm not going to get into it here. It's a long and torturous argument, and I don't have all of my research in a row for that. But I think it's fair to say that what we have is special and unique, and the French tried it in the French Revolution. They couldn't do it. They were using the same, or they thought, principles that we were using. They were not, by the way. The United States was formed out of the Scottish Enlightenment. It's very different from the Enlightenment. I think I've said this elsewhere before. If you don't understand the Dark Ages and that they were dark in a way, you can't understand the Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment is the answer in many ways to the Dark Ages, right? Which is the rediscovery, if you will, not that they were necessarily gone, of the texts that formed Western civilization and culture. Things like Plato's Republic, right? All the writings from Rome and ancient Greece, and a bunch from Jerusalem. The three great cities that formed the world. Athens, Rome, and Jerusalem. And so we rediscover this cultural heritage that we were born into. Born into. And that enables us to form a new type of governance, which has never been tried before and hasn't even been attempted to be properly replicated since, where we have a two-tier governmental system. Each state is allowed to govern itself as it sees fit with whatever kind of functions it wishes and structure it wishes, right? Get whatever charter that it cares to come up with. And then what happens is there is a federal governance over that. And all of that is constrained by the Constitution. The Constitution is the only document in history, at least that's active, where it's all about constraints of government, right? So it starts with basically the premise that you were born or maybe created or came into being by God with certain inalienable rights. And then it proceeds from those rights, not a single right. Those rights have consequences, we'll say, right? So from there, everything else is derived. But it starts with this idea of creation and birth and being. And in that way, that's the quote, birth of a nation. Because everybody sort of buys into the idea that no matter what your, say, previous culture was, you can be born into our culture. And of course, this is already a problematic way to speak with what I was saying earlier about Colin Woodard's point. Hey, there's a lot of cultures here, man. There's, 8, 9, something like that. Cultures in this place that we call the United States. And they're very distinct and they're still in place. They're still intact. The different cultures of the Federation of Nations that we call the United States is still intact. And it's interesting because Woodard points out things like Appalachia's Appalachia. Tennessee is 3 different places. There's Mid Tennessee, there's East Tennessee, and West Tennessee. Just talk to anybody from Tennessee, they'll tell you. Right? California is like, I don't know, should be at least 4 states easily. There's just 4 different types of people there. So the lines that we have in states are not very good lines. But with the federal system, which is a replacement for the king, like they knew what they were doing. They're like, well, we can't really do without a king. That's not possible. So we got to do something. How do we manage the cases where we need a king without giving them full-time power? Oh, well, it's all emergency powers. And so people say like, well, emergency powers mean you're not free. No, emergency powers mean the world works that way and you better account for it or you're screwed. That's what emergency powers means. Can they be abused? Yeah. Can anything be abused? Yes. This isn't really a highbrow genius type of a point. Anything can be abused because people, right? And it just turns out that people are all imperfect, apparently, and it's an imperfect world. I hope you were sitting down for that. I didn't mean to shock you. And so that has implications. And the implications are, it doesn't really matter what form of government you have, it can be abused. Like, this isn't an interesting point that something about the form of government can be abused. Like, no kidding. That's called Tuesday. That's called the sun rises in the east and gravity holds you to the ground. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Of course that's true. That's universally true forever. But it's not a critique. It's a statement of observation of how the world is. That's not a critique. Right? And so if you're treating it as a critique, you're a moron. You need to figure it out. Seriously. So yeah, you can abuse those powers, but the founders put in this 3-legged system with a balance of powers. Not 2, by the way, 3. What an odd number to pick. It's almost like they knew all about Pythagoras and Plato and their love triangles or something. That might show up later somewhere. I don't know. I'm not an expert. There's something very important about 3 and the balance. And the fact that little things like the Supreme Court is an appointment for life, and everything else is elected, and a bunch of things have term limits. How they got that way, we can debate, right? We can debate like, oh, how this unfolded. It's like, yeah, you can look at, we'll say, material cause or something and say that's how it unfolded. It's like, well, no, that was the material cause of what happened, but that's not how it unfolded. Things unfold in mysterious ways that we do not yet understand. And so, what is a nation? Or more properly, what is our nation? If you're in the United States, the Federation, United Federation of States or Nations, it is an adherence to that set of ideals. It is not an unconstrained liberalism. It is a classical liberalism because it is based in the idea of the constraints laid out by people like Plato and Aristotle. It's laid out from those presuppositions. That's why you can point to classical liberalism and say this is a thing. The problem is when it was emulated, it was not laid out that way. You can't sit in the milieu, if you will, of continental philosophy on the European continent and emulate what we have because you're not starting from the same place. All of the documents on how to run a country in Europe actually say, oh, these rights are granted by, right? Unlike the Constitution, which says basically by right of your birth, you are granted these things. It has nothing to do with being granted by a government. It's granted by the creator, effectively. That's super important because it worked for at least 250 years. And almost nothing else has ever lasted that long, especially not a government. And we can argue about why it lasted so long so far. And there's lots of good arguments to be made is big landmass, lots of space for people to spread out in when they had disputes, right? Although if you read something like Albion Seed, a lot of fighting in the beginning, right? Until we had a common enemy, which was the king. It was just a lot of battles. The same religious wars that were going on in Europe were going on here on a very small scale because there weren't a lot of people here back then. And there were other worries. You had the French agitating the Indians, Native Americans, to move against the colonists so they could steal the colonies away from England, right? And we are very much caught up in a larger war. Very much. We did not win a war against England. That's a ridiculous thing to think about. However, it's an important story to believe. It's not a contradiction. That's just a statement. It's very hard for your average human being to understand the depth and breadth, we'll say, of something like the 10 Years' War, the implications of the war over global trade, the enmity that France has for England, even though they're almost the same bloodline, like they should be the same nation at some point, right? Like the weirdness, like all the European kings are related. It's very strange because it's hierarchical. And we don't understand hierarchy anymore at all for some reason. That's the main thing that we want. One thing we've lost that would fix the world, hierarchy. You just teach people hierarchy and that they're in the hierarchy and probably not near the top. And that would help. That would fix a bunch of things instantly. It's worked tremendously well for us. We've been using it for years. It works really well to help people. It's like, bro, you're not going to be Elon Musk. You should just be the best you that you can be and be better when you can, and everything will be fine. And stop trying to reach for things that are way out of your grasp. And it turns out that once you get that sense of where you are in the hierarchy, it solves domicide, and bang, your life improves immediately. You can focus on getting better every day and not focus on a war halfway across the world whose decisions don't make any sense to you and will never make any sense to you because you're not privy to the information. And you're not going to be, and you shouldn't be. You shouldn't bother yourself with that. Like, you have to take care of you. You have to take care of your household. You have to take care of your yard. You have to take care of the people around you. You don't have time to worry about the people in Israel and the people in Ukraine and the people in Gaza and the people in Russia and the people in Africa. I mean, who knows what's going on in Africa? I can't keep track. I wouldn't even try. There's a new war every day in Africa. No one ever talks about that. It's a flood of information. What you need is to know where you are in a hierarchy. Now, there are people who are by status of their birth, because maybe they grew up extremely wealthy. They are primed and ready and educated into from a very young age, paying attention to those things. That's not you, though, because you wouldn't be watching this stream. And if it is you and you're watching the stream, you're nodding. Yeah, they are nodding if they're watching. They know what I'm talking about. Yeah, the Tucker Carlsons of the world grew up differently. It makes a difference. They pay attention to different things and they're trained to do that. That's not you. Don't pay attention to those things. You don't know what's going on over there. And just one quick example, because I can't really help myself. On the one hand, any idiot will tell you that since the maybe late 70s, at least the early 80s, mid 80s for sure, I know because I saw the documents, the plans to build nuclear weapons have been online and available to everybody on the internet. They're well known. On the other hand, everyone's all upset, especially on Twitter, about, oh no, they keep telling us Iran's on the cusp of building nuclear weapons. Okay, of course they are. Like I don't even understand the argument here. Of course they are. Everybody knows how to build them. It's just a matter of the technical precision and the equipment needed. And they do seem to have access to that through corrupt people in Europe who sell them the equipment, even though they're not supposed to. And we know all that. This is well documented. So you get this weird dichotomy of people going, we're not falling for this. They're on the cusp of nuclear weapons things again. And it's like, well, what if they are? Like, how do you know they're not? Of course they are. They almost certainly are. It's been a long enough time since we bombed their facilities that they could have gotten them back up and running and been refining uranium. Because the trick to nuclear weapons is not, like I said, the information's been out on the internet for decades, accessible to actually anyone, or at least anybody who went anywhere near a university. You didn't have to attend. I didn't attend. Easy enough to get in there and like go online and look this stuff up. It's been there. It was on Gopher back in the day. Well, then what's the hang up? The hang up is it's very hard to refine uranium. It's very hard to get some of the precision materials, not only do the refinement, but also to make the bomb. But you can. It's not impossible by any means. And that's the problem. So of course Iran could be on the verge of nuclear weapons. Of course they need to be bombed every so many years. How many years? I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. But someone is. It's ridiculous to just throw that out and say no. Because they are a nation. And they are a nation of people who will use a nuclear weapon. Now, I would argue they're no threat to us. Maybe we shouldn't care. Different argument, right? Why do we care about the Middle East? I don't know. I'd say we need more glass. Let's glass the place over and be done with it. It's been warring forever and I ain't got the time no more. But I'm also not qualified to pay attention to the Middle East. I didn't grow up being able to pay attention to that. And learning the skills of diplomacy and understanding these complex technical things, although I understand quite a few of them, unfortunately, probably bad on me for wasting my time on all that, ultimately. But, here we are. So a nation like Iran, which is a nation, right? They have certain birth, right? And they're also a country because they have a certain government, we'll say. They have a more cohesive identity, and that's held together by their religion. And typically, until like 4 days ago, every country was held together by their religious belief and not by their governmental structure or who ran the government necessarily. In the old days, a federation of nations would be held together by an emperor or a king of, right? But an emperor is a king of an empire, and a proper emperor has many titles. The Holy Roman Emperor had a ton of titles, the last one. Why? Because that king had a different title that attached to the culture or the nation of each of the different places that they were king of. That's how it worked. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I'd say that's a superior system. That is a reasonable argument to be made at this point. The hierarchical kingship system seems to be superior in most aspects. There's only one exception to that, and that seems to be the United States. Although that might be coming to an end. At least that's the fear of many people. I'm not sure that's true. I think the United States is actually kind of fine. What we need to do, however, is focus on better leadership. No one talks about leadership, and no one talks about the power of charisma, and no one talks about how mimicry it rules the world and runs things. People are not convinced by arguments. Jonathan Peugeot recently said this on Winston Marshall's podcast. He said, people are convinced by action. Action begets action. Right, because mimicry rules the day. This is why Girard is not talked about enough, although purely a bad guy, by the way, and also very, very wrong about a bunch of stuff in a bad way. But Girard is talking about the most important things, mimicry and sacrifice. And no one's talking about that. And no one will touch charisma, even though it's a feature of the world you're not getting around. So you better figure out how to deal with it instead of pretending like charisma is bad in all cases. I know there's been a lot of talk about World War II consensus, and I heard, I forget who it was, said recently, he said, well, yeah, all these people are talking about how, well, Peugeot in particular, right? Like, well, there's one bad guy, right? And then everybody else is a good guy. It's like, did you skip the Cold War? Everybody else is not a good guy. That's just false. Right now, was there a story told? Are we operating as if there's a flat world version, consensus, which is a type of agreement, by the way, that something happened and that's how we've been, quote, operating? Well, some people have been operating that way, sure. And that operation worked just fine for them for a while, maybe, unless everything broke in the 1960s, in which case it didn't really work very long now, did it? Now, if you have a look at things like the Cold War, I think you can make the case very easily that the post-war consensus bottomed out in the early 60s, maybe late 50s, because it was too flat. And what we've been living with ever since is the chaos of that. And that chaos, we'll say, wasn't evident or not manifest because things have momentum and they take time until more recently, when it got 3 generations out from the war. Now that we're 3 generations out from the war, things are very bad. We don't understand the global conflict anymore because Napoleon forced us all into this relationship with nations and emperor and country, where he just jiggered up countries by drawing lines on a map, giving them a government or some sort of governance, and calling it a day. And then what does he do? He forces the bishop to crown him emperor, which is ridiculous. And then what is he? He's just the emperor. He doesn't have titles that connect to the cultures of the places that he's ruling. And that destroys the world. All because nobody in France really understood what happened here in the United States. The thing that we manifested somehow through some miracle, I think it's safe to call it, has lasted for a very long time. Even though it's full of diverse people with very different beliefs. The biggest thing I got out of Colin Woodward's American Nations and it's right at the end, towards the end of the book, unfortunately, is this idea of public versus private Protestantism, which explains the North-South divide way better than anything else I'd ever come across. And I felt like, wow, for the first time, I actually understand where I live. That book is unbelievable at teaching you where you live if you live in the United States. Now, unfortunately, my copy is somewhere. I don't know where. It seems to be hiding on me. Otherwise, I would have held it up and all that nonsense, but I could not. Fortunately, I was able to research because I couldn't remember off the top of my head. It's been a few years since I read the book. What his alternative to nation was, and it's this federation of nations. That's what he thinks the United States is, a federation of nations. And I think I agree. We are a lasting federation of nations with a two-tiered governmental system, right, where we have one form of government at the top and roughly 50 or maybe a little bit more, depending upon how you think about these things, forms of government underneath, all of which are constrained not by the government itself, but by a document. By a document. And if you understand that the modification of continental philosophy by the English results in things like the Magna Carta, right? And that we stole all that from them. So we're not stealing from the Continentals. We're stealing from England, which has already modified it. And then we're upgrading that. And we've upgraded it into the most influential federation of nations. And if you want to call that an empire, I disagree, but I can understand your confusion in this recent era or error, as the case may be, in how these things are split up. Sure, American empire, I guess it's really bad term. Empires are usually done by conquest or by treaty or by agreement. We didn't do any of those things. I recently got in a Twitter argument with people who said like, oh, we're in Syria. And I'm like, what do you mean we're in Syria? And they're like, we have a base there. Yeah, so does Russia. So does Turkey. So does Hezbollah. So does Iran. They all have bases in Syria. Why are you blaming us if we're one among many bases in Syria for something that happens in Syria? We don't control the government. Of course, they think we do. Are you sure it's not one of the other countries with bases in Syria? Because that seems to be your thesis. But we do have influence. And we have influence by virtue of our success. And success causes people to mimic. And that's why I think Girard is really important in a way, although you've got to fix all this nonsense because the French just love to make up nonsense and do the worst corruptions to good ideas that you could possibly think of. They're very good at that. They're very bad at goodness itself, unfortunately. They didn't used to be, but we are where we are. Look, this is a great place. The United States is freaking amazing. Anybody can come here, buy into the virtues and values, and have a wonderful life. Yeah, we're going to kick out all the people that refuse to conform, of course, and we should. Otherwise, we're not a place. It's not about nation or country or state. You're not a place. You don't have definable boundaries if you let anybody in and come in to do whatever they want. You just don't. And that, how much can we get away with style of liberalism is the battle between liberalism as an unmoored concept and classical liberalism as a liberal state of being constrained by the ideas outlined in the classic Western canon, which maybe includes more than we'll say Athens, Rome, and Jerusalem, but doesn't include everything. We are built on the Scottish Enlightenment. That's what we are built on. And for some reason, the Scots got that right. Might be the only thing they ever got right, but hey, we'll take it. And that's the problem, is that people do not understand this. Now, do you have to understand this? No, you don't. But you do need to understand a story that lets you operate within that framework. I don't know what your level of comprehension is. It's probably a lot lower than you've been led to believe. Unfortunately, I think we were all lied to about what we can comprehend and how that happens. But You need a story that you can comprehend that allows you to participate in the American dream, which is not a mere dream in the way that you have at night. It's a dream that allows you to participate in a manifestation of something better than you are now and better than you knew you could be. How much better? Maybe not much better, but it doesn't matter. It's the better that matters. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the better. Because really, what it's all about to be here, to be part of the world, is to be better. That's what the world needs. The world needs you to be better. And that makes a better world just by making yourself better. You don't need to worry about the wars. You don't need to worry about what's happening in Africa. You don't need to worry about what's happening in the state next to you. You need to worry about being better. And in the United States, you have the level of freedom required within the constraints of, we'll say, Plato and Aristotle, to make yourself better. You got to put in the work. But you can, more so than in any other country. Little known fact, most European countries, the money has been in the same families for 400 or 500 or 600 years. We haven't been around for that long. We have the best economic freedom of any place on earth. It's always been that way. Always. Always, since day one. That's why so many people came here. That's why so few people leave this place. So few people leave. People are trying to get in constantly. I remember I did a contract at Nokia back before they got bought by Microsoft. They were talking about the pipeline from Finland into the United States. It was a big deal that people get the hell out of there. Not everybody. Some people were happy with the welfare state that Finland is and all that, but a lot of people wanted out. And there was a pipeline to do that. And it came to the Boston office to do that. In many cases, not the only place, but I don't know why. Nobody was going the other way. That's for damn sure. It's a strange thing. And we don't stop and appreciate that. But we should. People want to be here. People want to come here. People that come here succeed. Lots of people come here, don't speak the language, and make $1 million within a few years. And if you were born here and you didn't do that, fair enough. Maybe you can't ever make $1 million no matter what. I don't know. But maybe you could have if you tried harder. That's the shame. Because they did, and they didn't even speak the language. There were stories about this all the time. CNN had to stop doing them because they were pretty down on the U.S. even years and years ago, a couple decades ago, probably at this point. So look, that's all I have. If anybody is around and would like to join me on this wonderful 4th of July, where we celebrate the awesomeness of the United States, usually by blowing things up in the sky to make pretty things in the backdrop of the stars, then please feel free to do so. I shall post the link. Let me post it here on Rumble too, since it does not post automatically from StreamYard. For some reason, I can only pin this post on navigating patterns, but the chat is depressingly quiet. So, Anselman, T.S. Eliot's Notes Towards the Definition of Culture is an interesting read. I bet. I don't think I have read that. I shall check that out if I can. I think culture is a whole other matter because that's another term that we, let's say, don't have a good handle on as people anymore. We used to. And I think that's the other thing that people aren't realizing. A lot of the words and concepts we struggle with, no one struggled with 75 years ago even. I think this is all new, and there's no reason for it other than we have, unfortunately, destroyed our ability to comprehend the world. in favor of literacy. You can see my previous live stream on that. The difference between literacy and comprehension and why it matters, we'll say, is in a previous live stream. It's super important to sort of understand that people in the past didn't have to think about these things. They were already taken care of. They didn't suffer from domicile because they had a place to hang out. They knew where they were in the world, and they were able to be content there because they weren't always looking at where everybody else was in the world. As Jordan Peterson says, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today. Right. That gives you that slow improvement over time. By the way, I know I was supposed to get the 12 Rules for Rice book club up and running. I've been unbelievably sick all week. So everything got completely trashed and put on hold, including my work on my workbook for my other book, which is coming soon. We're going to have a meeting with the printer and get the drop shipping thing sorted out. You will be able to get one of these. I have to send out a few copies, which I haven't done yet. But I will be doing that. It's just, yeah, I was really sick. So I was basically in bed for most of this week. So I did not get a bunch of stuff done. I do have part 2 of Weinstein and Lindsay coming out. Part 3 has been recorded. I might be able to record part 4 tomorrow. I was going to try it today, but I did not get around to it because I was on Nate's wonderful stream talking to those guys. And I think, one of the primary problems that we have that's actually a huge problem right now is people do not understand the degree to which they're listening to people who aren't good at what they're doing or able to pull off the points that they're trying to make, because they really don't have the grasp on the world that everybody thought they did. They had maybe a new idea or a new perspective, a new way of looking at something, and then it runs out. And then they're stuck. And that, we're seeing a lot of that. And so people are just celebrity hopping at some point, right? Maybe their celebrities are more intellectual in nature. But a lot of these guys, they don't know what they're talking about. And they're struggling with ideas for no reason that have been worked out before. And a lot of people, too, are very reticent to get help, right? And when you offer them help, you give them a definition. They don't like that definition. Okay, what's your definition? They don't have one that makes any sense. They use a lot of abstract terms to avoid drawing boundaries, usually because they're leftists, and that's sort of a problem. And then everybody ends up confused. But they heard something they liked. And so they're like, this person's smart. I'm going to listen to them about these other things. And eventually they just run into something. And that's sort of like the MAGA Maha thing, which is just foolishness and ridiculous, whatever. I know that leftists need categories so they know who to hate, which is why they made up MAGA. And I know that the people on the right are cheeky and clever, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll adopt your stupid term and we'll roll with it so that we'll disarm you so you can't do anything about it. Right. That's what's going on there. There's the low IQ crowd on the left, and then there's the people who aren't low IQ. And maybe they're not all on the right, because of course there aren't just two things. Very confusing for the low IQ people. That also comes out in the James Lindsay Brett Weinstein talk. Very confusing when you're low IQ. But they are. They're out over their skis, and their systems are running out, and then they're just causing problems. And it's too bad to watch all the chaos, and it's going to get worse, unfortunately. Anselman, I like the French nickname for the British, Lèche Roast Biff. I don't know what that means, but it sounds very French and clever, and therefore I hate it, because I don't know. I don't like the French. I'm French Canadian, damn it. And we didn't like the French. I don't know why. Yeah, it's hard to understand, I guess, looking out at it, why people are so confused when, maybe it's Curtis Yarvin mentions Moldbug there, runs into a wall. All his systems end up being bad ways to think about the world. It just took a long time to figure that out, and he's admitted it. So good on him. Why they don't get the picture. These people that you think are smart are not smart. It's that simple. I think that's all. And everyone's got a unique perspective. And we're living in the era of unconstrained liberalism, which is an impossible thing. You're liberated from what? Liberated to do what? That was the problem of the French Revolution. They didn't know what they were being liberated from. Sanity is what they got liberated from. Technically, I'm speaking technically here, right? When you're an individual, you are alone already, automatically. You've set yourself alone. And that causes you to go insane, technically. Pastor Paul Vanderklay talks about this all the time. I have to catch up on his videos too. Apparently, he's had 3 really good videos this week, and I'm way behind. But I'll try to catch up on those and I don't often listen to Paul anymore, but it sounds like he's on to something vaguely interesting here. And I do generally like his stuff. When he's on, he's on. When he's good, he's really good. So we are caught with a bunch of people stuck in this frame of, we're going to listen to this guy because he said something that sounded smart to us and he's smarter than we are. And then they blow up because their system is not wrong. It's not correct. It's not complete. It's not big enough to contain much. It doesn't have explanatory power. And it just takes people a long time to figure it out for whatever reason. And then when they do figure it out, they don't know what to do. And that's fair enough. Like, we are in a time of collapsing institutions, of things that are being destroyed, we'll say, left, right, and center, brought down, made equal, right? We're just wrecking hierarchy, left, right, and center. And it's hurting us. And part of that is because we won't accept the simple, kind, nice, happy stories that held us together. Did George Washington chop down a cherry tree and lie about it initially? And then say, I could not tell a lie. I chopped down the cherry tree. Of course he did. Of course. Why? Because it's a story that's truer than true. In other words, you could not impugn his honor. He was so honorable that he gave up the highest office in the United States of his own volition and set a standard that stood for a very, very, very long time, until some corrupt, evil leftist broke it, by the way. Also broke a lot of other things. That might be a hint. FDR just wrecked a bunch of stuff. Totally shifted the balance of power towards the federal government unnecessarily. And those reins were not released right away. And a lot of people tried to mimic what he did later, which was very damaging to the federation of nations that we call the United States. And we're still suffering the consequences of that. When Byrne Power talks in How We Got Here about trauma from the wars, dead on. And there's political trauma from the wars that I think is important to think about. But stopping there, I think, is ridiculous. I made this case earlier on Nate's stream on Grail Country. There is no World War II. That's a ridiculous way to think about the world. Ridiculous. You cannot understand what happened. So either accept the simple story, Mustache Man bad, and move on with your life, because maybe that's all you need to know to have a good life and to make yourself better. Or you've got to dig into Napoleon, the French Revolution, and the beheading of the English king, because it's the only way you're going to understand the Great War. And that's going to lead you straight to the Reformation. And that's a big deal, because that wrecked the world. For sure. For sure. And the bubble of apparent success that's happened here in the Federation of Nations we call the United States is a very interesting and curious thing for sure. But is it good ultimately? because everyone's following what they think we do around the world. And they're wrong about what we do. And they didn't start where we started. We technically started fresh. No other country is starting fresh. And now we've got the United Nations. What the hell does that even mean? It's a conglomeration of countries. It's not United Nations. It's a bunch of countries squabbling politically over things that aren't even political. They're social. Politics is about group relations, not personal relations, group relations of strangers mostly. It's not some trapped in the bubble of governance thing that we talk about in the United States, by the way. That's how we talk about politics here. Oh, politics is about governance. No, it's not. Politics is about the government. No, it's not. Now, to be fair, if you're in the United States and you say, I'm in politics, and you're not part of the government, I would say, no, you're not in politics in the United States unless you are an elected or appointed official. That's the only way you're part of politics in the United States. Otherwise, you're not part of politics. Politics affects you. Sure, lots of things affect you. Elon Musk's affects you. And until recently, he had nothing to do with the governance of the United States. Is that political then? Like, what's our definition? The European definition is more like, yeah, the dynamics of groups. Sure, that's politics. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. This is not how we use it here in the United States. Is it about an election or voting or being appointed or a task involving the governance? Then it's not political. I'm sorry, not here. Super important because we're really confused about that. Anselman, Gerard's scapegoat is not the biblical one, right? Anselman, Gerard runs roughshod over Anglo-Cathodoxy. It's horrific. It's horrific. It should be a tell, right? Because he never talks about Mary. I'm just going to tell you right now, if you don't talk about Mary, you're just corrupting something perfect, right? Like, sorry. But yeah, Gerard is horrible. But he talks the most about the two most important and least talked about things right now, which is, and he ties them together inappropriately, which just drives me nuts, which is sacrifice, right? Which is the scapegoat, and mimicry, not mimetic desire. Mimetic desire is individualism all over again. It's not mimetic desire. Like, you have to mimic something because you're retarded. Just the way it is. I'm sorry. Like, and you mimic lots of things, and that's how you grow up. And that's how all animals do it too. I don't understand why it's a desire. It's not a desire. He's so stupid sometimes. It just drives me nuts. He's so French. It just, yeah, it infuriates me. The French infuriate me. My ancestors left for a reason. They didn't like Paris or something, which was infecting the whole place. That's the only thing I can figure. Someday I'll dig into that history a bit better. But yeah, my grandfather did not want any of his kids learning French Canadian, by the way. So just saying, he was a big American. He would sing the Canadian French national anthem in French occasionally, and he loved that. But also, kids did not speak French Canadian. My grandmother, on the other hand, she rather liked French. She was a bit of a Francophile. But there's definitely a there. Nobody likes the French, even the people who used to live there. Should be a hint. Gerard is. Oh, I'll do more on Gerard at some point. I would love to. I would love to do Gerard with Peugeot, because I don't think people listen to Gerard very well. I don't think they really understand the things he's saying. The things he's saying about we'll say the gospel stories and stuff is horrific. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's horrible. It's just horrible. I can understand why it would appeal to, we'll say evangelicals, but it's really horrible, like monumentally horrible, and there's no reason for it. I should definitely do a thing on Gerard at some point. But there's so many things to do, and things are moving really fast. That's the other part of the chaos that we're in. Things are moving so fast. People are just leaping from influencer to influencer. What's an influencer? An influencer is someone you want to mimic. Weird. So you can see that that term it should be everywhere, right? Who are you going to mimic? You're going to mimic the guy with the high profile in the thing that matches the goal that you want to achieve. And maybe your goal is knowledge, which is a bad goal, but we live in the age of gnosis. And so that's where some of these people come from. I mean, that's the Jordan Peterson trick, if you will, or one of them, is he tells you, you already know this stuff. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Well, that's interesting, Jordan. That's interesting. And that's an attraction to people. And fair enough. I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan myself, and someday I'll get the book club up and running. I'll do an announcement live stream probably, and then once I schedule it all. Oh, Polly flew away. She was busy. It happens. Make sure she flies back into her cage. There we go. Now she's caged up. Get in your cage, Polly. Stay there. So once I get that sort of settled, I think I can move on from there. I also got to finish my workbook for my book, but then I can start talking about Gerard. I'll find somebody. Maybe Gustavs will join me again because we talked a little bit about Gerard in the past for some Gerard talk. But I'd like to get somebody who's more deeply read in his silly books, and then I can crush them with his interviews because he just reveals it all in the interviews. I think he's got that level of French arrogance that causes him to sort of spill the beans about. Because the interviews are interesting. The David Cayley interviews, they're very interesting. It's more about the way he formulates and leads David Cayley into his ideas. And that pattern, once you see it, is like, oh, I see what he's doing. I see why he's doing this. I see why he phrased things this way and why he changed the phrasing over time. It's very sneaky. I don't like it. I don't like sneaky. And because a lot of the world is psychological projection, you can kind of tell who people are by what they assume other people are doing. Like if you assume that like someone's sneaky, that's because you're sneaky. Not in all cases, but also. That's one of those deep patterns, this projection, this psychological projection that nobody talks about. Psychological projection is everywhere right now because people are trying to be individuals, which is impossible. And then they just end up trying to cast the world in their image. And so they think the only motivations that exist are the same as their motivations, because of course you do, because you're stuck in your own personal private perspective. And so you cast that out onto everyone else. And I was recently, in a backhanded way, accused of sending somebody out to, argue a case for me, which absolutely did not happen. It's so funny. Like I command some army of trolls or something. Like go forth and like I wouldn't do that even if I could, because I wouldn't waste my time. Also, people have an inflated sense of their own value, especially or their own entitlement to my time, energy, and attention. And if I grant that to you, you should be grateful and not think it's part of some grand scheme. Because I'm just trying to help, And if I can't, I can't. And if I'm bad at it, I'm bad at it. But at least I try. And that's my obligation, is to try. My obligation is not to sit back and do nothing. And my obligation is not to succeed, because it's not up to me. And I know that. Like, I'm well aware. decades of failing, right? But I am obligated to try, and so I do. I do try, and for better or for worse. But that's part of the ethos that I got from growing up in the United States with the virtues and values that were instilled as part of that formation, not education. Education's bullshit. I educated myself. Uh, Formation that happened in the public schools in some cases, in private school for 3 years. Uh, Junior high, my first year of high school, all private school, Catholic. Um, that formation that happened long before that, and then as well, but before that, right, was important, and that's wrapped up in the identity of the United States and the further identity of New England, because I grew up in New England. I grew up in Massachusetts mostly. 4 years when I was a baby, basically from basically less than 1 years old to 4 years old or something. We were in Kansas, but we were at the university or at KSU. But other than that, I was pretty much Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So that's that formation of Yankeedom, Yankee culture, even though that they're not the actual Yankees, the Yankees are the Dutch. That was important. That remnant of Puritanism is what formed a lot of me, informed and formed, because it's both, right? Inform, right? And we don't understand these very simple terms, and we confuse them for things like education, which is a worthless term, absolutely worthless term. First of all, you couldn't educate somebody if you wanted to. They have to educate themselves, just how it is. And second of all, what you're describing is almost always formation, not education. You're not giving them facts about the world. That would be information, by the way, and not education. You're not teaching them because you can try to teach people, but you can't actually teach them, right? Everything takes cooperation. And when we talk about the United States, we're really talking about cooperation at a scale that has never been tried before, in a way that has never been attempted before, under conditions that will never exist again. That's super important. It makes the United States unbelievably unique. And it means it's dangerous to try and follow in its footsteps because you don't have the same roots. The reason why you're not going to be Elon Musk is not merely because you're not as smart as Elon Musk, and maybe you're smarter than Elon Musk. I don't know. It's not merely because you're not willing to sleep under your desk like Elon Musk was. Maybe you are. I don't know. It's more likely because when he grew up, he and his brother were given $750,000 to blow to learn business by starting a bunch of businesses and failing. And if that didn't happen to you at that age, you can't be Elon Musk. Sorry. Now, you might be bigger and better than Elon Musk, but don't be following his path because you're not on his road. It's that simple. And people don't realize that. Right? And the beauty of the United States is that there is no single path to success, whether it's financial success or family success or spiritual success. There's no single path. And there's just fewer constraints, unlike the continent, unlike England, where it's very constrained. And that's not a straight plus for the United States, because the problem that we've had recently, or until recently, excuse me, ugh, I don't know what's going on there, is that a bunch of people who are unqualified and completely incompetent got in the halls of governmental power and screwed everything up. And some of them were injected into what we consider high status society or something, or the the higher end of the class system that we pretend we don't have, because everybody has a class system. And that ended up being disastrous, absolutely disastrous, because they were incompetent or evil or both. Usually both, which is really lucky, because you don't want competent evil people, man. That's no good. That's a bad day. That's what that is. That's a bad day. And we just don't appreciate this. And we don't appreciate why people can't just be the United States. But you can't. And that problem is spread. Why can't I be Elon Musk? Well, you can't, because you didn't grow up Elon Musk. It's not that hard. Why can't I just do what he did and be as successful as he was? Because you can't do what he did, because you don't even know what he did, because you're not him. And a lot of his formation happened when he was young. And if you're not that age having that formation, it's ridiculous to believe you can follow that path and have the same results. Each person is unique, and they need to find their own path to the thing. And can they? A lot of people just can't. A lot of people have the attention span of a fly. I mean, you don't have to believe me. I've got a couple of 8-hour live streams. Can you do an 8-hour live stream? I can. A lot of people can't. A lot of people can't do a live stream. A lot of people. And can you do it well? Can you do it in a pirate outfit like I can? Right? There's a lot that goes into things. And of course, I don't do this alone. There's a lot of work that goes into this. I don't do my thumbnails. I had AI do half my research. Right? I get a lot of feedback from the team. We have a team. This isn't just me. My channel is not me. I didn't even pick the name for my channel. Right? These things are important. It's important to know Elon Musk didn't get where he got by himself by any means. I was watching Diary of a CEO. Is an interesting channel. I don't watch it all the time. I haven't seen all of them or anything. He's an interesting interviewer. He's very good interviewer. And he was interviewing what's his name? O'Leary. He's one of the guys. He's Mr. Wonderful is his nickname. He's on that silly CNBC show where they do investments there. It's a ripoff of the original Dragon's Den from England. He was saying, O'Leary was saying, like, you have to like pay attention. And he was talking about working with Steve Jobs. And he said Steve Jobs was a jerk. I was like, yeah, everybody said that. Steve Jobs had no upside. Like Gates. No one liked Gates or Jobs. They were both jerks. No redeeming qualities whatsoever. Everybody loves working for Richard Branson, though. Just saying. He said the thing that Gates, showed him was you've got to be able to focus on the most important thing and filter everything out, right? Signal to noise. You have to have a signal to noise ratio really high signal. You have to decide there's 4 things I'm going to get done today and get them done today. And that was the key to Steve Jobs' success. And then he said, oh, well, Jobs kind of went overboard. Do you think? And he certainly did. And that's why he was a jerk to everybody around him for no apparent reason. But he was able to focus on 4 things a day. And when you're able to do that, you can be successful in business. But you got to be willing to do that. And you have to have the skills and ability to do that. You can't necessarily be educated into it. Maybe you will never have that ability. Sorry. But that's why you have the hierarchy. You need to know where you fit. And once you know where you fit, you can do what you can do to the best effect for everybody around you. Have you considered? Because you should. You really should consider that you're a Muppet. I'm a Muppet. We're all Muppets. It's fine. We just have to find our place. The Muppet Show, everybody had a place. When they were in their place, they were great and everybody else was better for it. And when they were out of their place, it was disastrous and everything fell apart. That's the deep domicide that Dr. John Vervaeke is correct about. It's not knowing your place in the world, not having a home in the hierarchy. If you're busy rejecting the hierarchy, or hierarchies as the case may be, then you're causing yourself to go through domicide for no reason. You don't need to be in domicide. You could find what you're good at and do that well. And maybe it is, would you like fries with that? But you know what? It'd be great to get some good restaurant service. That would really help. It's not a bad thing. It would be a wonderful thing for everybody. I assure you, it really would be good. But we've lost a sense for that. We're rejecting terms like nationalism. Everybody is in a nation. What do you mean you don't want to be a nationalist? What kind of psychopath are you? You're forcing domicide on you and everybody born with your culture. Why? Why are you rejecting the nation, the idea of a nation? You can't reject that. You can't reject your birth. You can't reject your culture. You can't do that. You will throw everything into chaos. That's the problem. There's an additional problem. I mean, when I grew up, people were formed in the schools and out of the schools mostly, but also in the schools. People aren't formed anymore. They're protected. And if you're going to protect people, they're not going to be formed. They're not going to be well formed. They're going to be weak and they're going to cry a lot and scream at the sky. And someone, wasn't Abe Lincoln in the cherry tree? No, was not. Honest Abe was a whole different thing. Apparently, he used to tell stories all the time and bore the piss out of everybody. But they were, they were the parable type stories. I remember back when this happened to me, right? Meant to convey a sly message to somebody to sneak it into their subconscious. No, it was George Washington and the cherry tree. I cannot tell a lie. I did chop down the cherry tree. Definitely happened exactly that way. I don't care what anybody says. But it's important. It's super important. And so when I get your presidential legends messed up, yeah, well, you get things mixed up because you're not here. And it's not foundational. It's not actually important to anything going on where you live. Right? I mean, it might be important as we'll say a topic of symbolic study to know like our founding myths, if you will. It's sort of a bigger, deeper question as to what you do about, let's say, the myth of World War II. That video is gangbusters, by the way. I'll do another one on it, I think. Ethan sort of requested one. So I'm like, yeah, we could do that. I forget what my idea was. I don't think I wrote it down either because I've been so sick all week. But I'll figure it out. It'll come back to me. But the reason why we have the problem of the post-war consensus is because that has replaced religion. That has replaced the church. The recession of the church is real. And it's a big problem. And on Nate's stream earlier today on Grail Country, we talked a little bit about that. A lot of the features and functions that the churches used to do have been taken over by government. And that should never have happened. We have to undo that post haste. And that's all a function and feature of Protestantism, for sure. I think it was Marcus, and I met Marcus in Washington, D.C., and I totally forgot. Sorry, Marcus. I met Nate in Washington, D.C., too. I met Dr. Jim in Arkansas, so it was nice to see the three of them, together on a stream. But I think it was Marcus who was talking about yeah, in England, monasteries were gone and they had to deal with all the things the monasteries used to deal with. And so the government took them over. Just had no choice. Of course, the government did a crappy job because the government always does a crappy job. But especially with social things, governance and social things, not good. Social things are supposed to be handled by the religious authorities. Government is supposed to handle the functional things and contract law and things like justice. And I think that's part of the problem when we don't have that balance and we have this sort of recent conception of the term country where you just draw lines on the map, give them a government and call it a day, you run into problems. And that's all Napoleon, by the way. Napoleon did all that to us. That didn't happen before Napoleon. And that's one of the big problems. Anselm, just Googled it. Cherry tree story is commonly misattributed to Lincoln. That has to be the most recent thing in the history of the internet, because only the internet could confuse those things. I don't know where anybody would have gotten that confusion from, because can't imagine it. I've never heard of it before. But this is the loss of our history. The grounding. You need historical grounding in order to do things. And like I was saying earlier, a lot of people are just listening to a lot of dopes who don't know what they're talking about, and then switching other dopes that they don't know what they're talking about. And the reason why they're dopes who don't know what they're talking about is because they don't have any historical grounding for the claims they're making. If you're going to make a claim, you better have historical grounding. Like, you better have ground to stand on to make the claim. And when you don't examine someone's historical grounding, or grounding in general, because it's not all historical, then you have a problem. History is a good measure of grounding, though. Like, how grounded is your claim? Is it a claim that has lasted the test of time? That's not a bad heuristic to use, right? And we're not using that heuristic. We're not using any heuristics, as near as I can tell. We're just sort of like, hey, it sounds nice to me. I think I'll believe James Lindsay, even though he's clearly retarded. What a dope. And that's going to come out more in those Brett and Lindsay conversations there. Wow. I just did part 3. I have to do 4 parts, unfortunately. I just can't wait for part 4. But like, the mistakes they're making, like, their logic is horrible. Like, these guys in logic have no overlap, like none. They clearly can't make connections between the things they say and obvious conclusions. Like, it's bad. It's really bad. And no one should listen to either of them about really anything complicated outside of their immediate fields of study. Seriously, like, yeah, even virology, not Brett's strong point for sure. I understand that, like, I used to watch him. I understand Dark Horse made their name on the fake news virus scam, and good for them. A lot of people did, but like, a lot of those people are blowing up because they're morons. It just takes a long time to see that they're morons, because things unfold over time and momentum is a thing, and you don't lose audience right away. And when you don't understand momentum, although of course I have a video of that on Navigating Patterns, you can check that out. You're not going to understand the world. It's going to be a really confusing place for you, especially if you don't understand the relationship between momentum and hierarchy, because those are super important relationships, actually. What is Anselman saying now? Anselman, I'd have liked you to have heard you sing some Cajun. I don't speak Cajun. I don't sing Cajun. Those French people got kicked out. They're Acadians. They get kicked out of Nova Scotia. And they left Nova Scotia and went all the way down the Mississippi, which is just strange. They went across the Great Lake, down the St. Lawrence, through the Great Lakes, down the Mississippi, which is just a very strange path. And that's why they have the sort of weird culture that they do. And that's also why we got them as part of Louisiana Purchase. Just fascinating history. Yeah, this little enclave of French people in the middle of nowhere in the swamps for no reason, doing weird things, eating frogs. Bullfrogs are big down there, I hear. I haven't been actually. I want to go. One of these days, I'll head off to Nolens and check it out. The show Swamp People is very interesting, especially the early seasons. The way those guys talk, because it's a mix of Southern and French Canadian, it's whacked. Could barely understand a word they're saying. It might be worse than the Scots, actually. But yeah, the Scottish people can't talk, especially the Northern Scots. Like, my goodness. Learn English, guys. Come on. Yeah, the Cajuns are worse, I think. They're almost unintelligible. They actually had captions on the show, if I remember correctly, because you couldn't tell what the guy was saying. And he had no teeth, and it was hysterical. It's a hysterical show. I love it. They go out and they hunt alligators for money, and they shoot them with a freaking 22, and they bait them with like rotted meat, and they throw them in the boat and take them. I'm just like, who does this? This is the nuttiest idea anybody ever had. These people are crazy, crazy, crazy. And every once in a while they go out shrimping or frogging or whatever. It's completely bonkers, their whole lifestyle. But they're part of the United States, the Federation of Nations, which I think Colin Woodard's right about that. Like, that's the best way to think about us, is a Federation of Nations. Anselman, tit gallop pour mamou, or something like that. Yeah, I don't. The way those people talk is completely unintelligible to me. I don't even speak French Canadian, so I used to go up to Maine all the time, and they'd be like, matin. And I'm like, what the hell's a matin? It sounds like a disease, you know? Or at Christmas, we'd eat Touquet. It's like, what the hell is that? You know? And yeah, just the way the relatives up, because in Biddeford, Maine, they have the largest French Canadian population in North America outside of Canada. Like, I'm related to everybody in Biddeford, Maine, man. Everybody. It's bad. Couldn't date up there. Too close. Too close. All cousins. Big families too. Like, my grandmother had 8 children. Like, it's nuts. Absolutely nuts. And they're all big families. All of them. It's crazy. Crazy, crazy. And they were right on the cusp where you had the good medical care, right? So the kids were surviving. So if you had 12 kids, you ended up with 11, like, whoa, instead of 3, which used to be the norm. It's a very different place, and that really shaped the United States. The industrialization and the way we did it, because we had the second industrial revolution in the world, basically, and we copied from England. We stole it all. And I'm going to be doing a video on hierarchy. I figured out how to do that video. So I'm going to do my video on hierarchy, and that will involve the history of Lowell, Massachusetts. Because I figured, we can do it this way. I have all the research done, and I haven't looked at it yet. I have to go review it. I know most of it in my head, but I give quality videos, guys. I do my research. This is what I hate about James Lindsay in particular and Brett Weinstein. They don't research anything. They could take 10 minutes and use one of these, and they'd be 100 times smarter than they are, but they refuse. For some reason, they refuse to look things up. Very simple things. I'm like, bro, where did you even get that idea from? I gotta know. I gotta know, right? And a lot of people just come up with ideas on their own, and they don't even realize it. They think that they didn't. And I'm like, you had to have come up with that on your own. There's no way you engaged with another human being and came to that conclusion, because it's really dumb. And only a single person could be that dumb. That's a good way to look at the world. Now, dumb things happen at the group level, at least from the person perspective. But sometimes they're not so dumb. Sometimes they just don't serve you or anything you understand or care about, and therefore they look dumb. And that's one of the problems. T. Sanders. James Lindsay is a sophist. Um, he's a moron. I think if he could be a sophist, that'd be a huge upgrade intelligence-wise. But honestly, uh, he's kind of a moron. Like, really dumb. I don't understand. Brett's too. I mean, just stupid. Like, these guys are just not that bright. This is why we have the Ivory Tower See My Video on Academia, to protect those people from the world and to protect the world from their bad ideas and extract their good ideas and use those because they're really good, right? It's just, they're not good at lots of things. They're only good at their one thing that they studied. And fair enough. Like, that's fine. That's a fine model, but you got to keep those people out of regular circulation. This intellectualism that's circling around that people are listening to, which is, you know, a lot the fault of Joe Rogan and a lot the fault of Jordan Peterson, I would say. This is not good for us. This is not good in general. And having influencers, which is going to happen if people are out in public, because they exemplify by their action. It's not great. It should be managed and controlled. And there'll be mistakes made in that management and control. But welcome to Tuesday. Like, I don't understand these arguments. Well, we can't implement that perfectly. Like, we can't implement anything perfectly. Well, why is that an argument against doing things? You only learn by failure anyway, so you might as well learn. Like, I don't get it. And maybe we have to learn at the group level, right? At the level of the United States, the Federation of Nations. What works and what doesn't. This is an experiment, after all, that doesn't work without a common idea of God. Explicitly. It was very interesting being on Grail Country earlier today because they all claim to be, quote, Christians, whatever that's supposed to mean. And none of them wanted to talk about that aspect of the country. And I'm like, but guys, that's the single most important part. And you want to have none of it? You don't want to address it at all? Or you want to brush it off and say, yeah? Really? That was shocking to me. I was utterly shocked that no one picked that up and ran with it. Of course, Marcus, I do like Marcus. He sent me a bunch of stuff to read, so that's cool. That was very nice of him. He's just stuck in this economic frame and flattened everything to economics. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, why do you think this is okay? This is totally not the way to think about the world. But we need economists, so fair enough. Yeah, it's weird to listen to people talk about nation, about liberalism, about these, call them second order abstractions, because I think that's what they are. And they don't understand what they're talking about. And they're using made up facts to bolster their own opinions on how this should work so that they can have a worldview for themselves. And it's like, you really can't have a worldview for yourself because you're dumb and you're limited by your personal private perspective. And you really need a worldview handed to you, preferably by a distributed cognition that's been working on it over time. And that's why I think there's, on the one hand, I agree the myth of World War II is going away or reaching its limits or something. Although maybe not. Maybe that's not what's reaching its limits, which would be my argument against that. But on the other hand, like, we need that. And it's interesting that Peugeot's out there talking about it and saying, I don't have an answer to this. I'm like, maybe you shouldn't point at it, dude, because the world is attention. I heard that somewhere. Like, maybe you shouldn't be pointing at it then. I point at it because I think I have a solution, by the way. But no one listens to me, which is fine. I can't get a convo with Peugeot, or at least I haven't yet. And I reached out to them. So keep needling him. I think we'd have a good conversation where we could make some progress on the ideas instead of the conversations he has with guys like Winston Marshall that are in disbelief and don't understand the core concepts, because they're so far away from Peugeot's vision of how the world works. And Peugeot doesn't realize that, I think. And also, I'd love to straighten him out about Peterson, but utterly shocking when you find out more about your heroes, we'll say. He's not really my hero. He's my compatriot in arms because he's also French Canadian, which, as we all know, are God's chosen people who will save the world. I'm convinced of it. Um, the disappointment when I asked him about that at Thunder Base, still bitter in my mouth. Why did you tell me this? Please lie to me. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I really like him. He's a good guy. He's struggling on a couple of issues, I think. I'd love to talk to him about Gerard. That would be fun. There's about a dozen things I could talk to him about. Maybe even nationalism. And it's interesting too, because I bet he understands nationalism better than most people, and that it's not bad. And I think it's the see when you say like, oh, the myth of World War II is breaking down, and I think you make a mistake if you interpreted part of the myth of World War II or the story, the flat story that came out of World War II, to you, because that's all you can understand, uh, as being nationalism bad. I think you really have to throw out babies with bathwater to get there. Uh, Nationalism is not even remotely bad. Again, it's a condition we're all born into, and we need to take that seriously, and really revivify it and revere it and make it sacred again. The place that you were born and the conditions you were born into are sacred merely for the fact that you're born into them, if nothing else. And that's where the quote individualism frame comes from, is that you, by virtue of your birth into a thing, make that thing sacred. Being is good. And if you don't have a sense for that, if you're not starting from those sort of first principles or base axioms, however you want to talk about them, then you're going to have a really hard time understanding the world. You're not going to understand why the world's attention is so important. Also, it would help to understand mimicry in that, right? You're not going to understand, we'll say, the importance of distributed cognition and why that matters to how you were formed and why formation matters and what that means to the world. Like all of these things are fantastically important. And I think an interesting thing that I've noted sort of recently, um, the thing we have the most in common, except for religion, is technically entertainment. Now, if you look around, you'll start to see that. That's why celebrities are worshipped. And then, of course, there's the rebels who just, oh, I'm not going to deal with it. Please stop rebelling against everything you see. Like, it's really tiresome and it's really bad for everybody and it creates chaos. This is the reason why we're in this mess, because everybody keeps rebelling against things that are good because they can't tell the difference. And I think the problem is if you don't understand that the world that we're living in is formed out of the materialism from Napoleon, who saved the world, or at least France, which was the world in some sense, from the French Revolution, and did very little else wrong, although I would argue he did a lot wrong. Then you won't understand the myth of World War II and the rise of the second emperor of Europe. And I think if you think of it that way, you can make real progress in understanding the pattern. Oh, there are these emperors of Europe, and they just wreck everything because you can't be an emperor of Europe without first being a king. And since Europe has no kings, it hasn't had any kings for a while, it's a problem. Making the king into a figurehead was a mistake. We need to restore that part of the hierarchy. Now, can we do it the way the United States did? I don't know. In Europe? I have no idea. I suppose it's theoretically possible, but I don't know. Is the United States going to last in the, with the system it has? I mean, I think so. I think we'll actually be perfectly fine. It really depends on the next election, to be honest. If the federal government doesn't stop having too much power, we're in for a rough ride for a while. Are we going to collapse? Is it going to be civil war? No. The only people talk about civil war are former leftists, and that's because they're fighting with the extreme leftists. And then they don't know where they fit because they think they're on the right because they're not on the left. Like, well, I see your confusion, but also there's 3 buckets, and you could just fix it that way if you wanted to. But for some reason, everyone's rejecting the number 3. It's a very strange thing indeed. Be good to get to the bottom of that. Part of it is just they can't, like a lot of people can't think outside the binaries. They just need to be told every time a customer comes to the register, ask, would you like fries with that? They just need that. Like there's a lot of people that need that. And we're denigrating that. We're replacing it with robots and AI. We're telling everybody, it's not good. We're not paying those positions particularly well. And maybe we don't have to, right? Because there should be other things in place to allow for that. But we need those jobs. It's not that we need those jobs to be done. We need those jobs for people to do. Jobs are for people to do. That's what they're for. They're not for the end product of the job. That's stupid. And that's the confusion that people have with things like robots and automation. You take those jobs away, especially the jobs that we'll say are handy for people who aren't sophisticated. Jordan Peterson talks about this in Maps of Meaning, that one client he had who couldn't stuff an envelope well enough to be useful. Those people exist. And I don't know how many there are, but if that's the bottom end of the range, we'll say, and the top end of the range is Elon Musk, there's a lot of hierarchy there. And we need all of those types of jobs, and we need them all to be valuable and valued, because otherwise we can't run the United States. That's how the United States was built. The United States was built on hard work and lots of it. There's something to the Protestant work ethic. I know I've talked to Bruce about this a couple of times on my Discord. We're still trying to dig into it, I think. I think Bruce actually has a better conception than I do. Not surprising. That's his field of study, would be Protestantism as such, we'll say. He's very knowledgeable about that history. Whereas I came to all history needs to be put in a religious framework. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Very late. Very late. I was taught secular history, which makes no sense at all and cannot be made sense of at all. It's not until you understand how the religious beliefs move people that you understand history. And then history makes perfect sense. And then all the patterns appear too, by the way. Because until you understand the driving forces, the powers and principalities, if you will, you don't actually understand why things happen. You have explanations for how things happen, but you actually have no whys whatsoever, because all the whys are wrapped up in belief. And the implementation of belief, or the participation in the belief, they're not wrapped up in the economics. Economics is the result of belief. It's always puzzled me why people say fiat currency. All currency is fiat. It has to be, because it's pointing to something higher than itself. I actually think the entire scheme of, let's say, money or finance got ruined when gold and silver became useful for anything other than ornamentation, because they're useful in electronics. That could be a sign that having the transistor age or the electric age even is evil. I don't know. But you got to put that on the table when you think about this stuff, which I find fascinating because obviously I'm a technologist. I love technology. Give me my gold-plated connectors, please. Give me my gold-plated chips. Give it all to me. I want it all. I need it desperately. And that higher set of ideals is what the United States was built on. And we're not merely a federation of nations, Again, I think Colin Woodard's dead on that. Read American Nations. It's a great book. Our federation is founded around virtues and values. And those virtues and values inform a better way of participation. It's more efficient. It's more direct. It's more flexible. It can move faster. Sometimes that's a bad thing, right? And it enables more people to do more stuff that they're good at without relying on a heavy bureaucracy. And unfortunately for me and for you and for everybody else, some of that bureaucracy was religious bureaucracy for sure. But also some of it was not. Some of it was governmental bureaucracy, which are different types of bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is important and we need it. And the areas where bureaucracy is useful, for example, is making sure you don't pollute the environment. Bureaucracy is very good at that. It's not very good at, making sure you get a fake news flu shot. Like, it's very bad at that. Right? Because that was a disaster all around. Still didn't come to terms with fake news flu stuff. Someday I'll do a stream on fake news flu and the virus scam. It's going to be fantastic. Totally demonetized forever. It'll be fine. I'm often reminded of, was it an officer and a gentleman, right? You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. Yeah, you probably can't. What is the truth anyway? Is nationalism bad? I don't think so. I think it's not optional, so it better be good. Otherwise, we're in a lot of trouble. Being is good. Creation is good. These things are good. If it's in the world, it's good. The question is, do you have a good relationship with it or a proper relationship to it? Because if not, that's what's bad. Not you and not the thing. Your relationship is bad. That's the problem. Start thinking of the world that way and thinking of the world in terms of nations, countries, and states. You'll understand the world better. And then you'll know where you fit in the world. Because we don't know where we fit when we call the United States a nation. It's a corruption of the term. We don't know where we fit when we think we're an individual, because the corruption of being. And that throws us into domicide. And that makes us skeptical about the stories we've been told. What happened in World War II? Who was the bad guy, the real bad guy? What is the truth? You don't need to know that. Sorry. Washington chopped down the damn cherry tree. He just did. And he didn't lie about it. He's awesome. Sorry. Not sorry. It's important that our liberalism, our liberal attitudes, our liberal capabilities are couched in the classics, in an engagement with Plato and Aristotle and the great Roman writers and Jerusalem. It's important because pure liberalism or unconstrained liberalism or just using the term liberalism can never work, ever. It's an individualistic identification against. It can't have any clear boundaries or meaning. It can't convey concepts and ideas. It's not possible. But with the power of psychological projection, you'll believe you heard something. And that's the problem with the word salad people like Brene Brown. To bring about world peace, we all just need to have empathy and love for one another. And then we'll realize the humanity in every person and we'll never go to war again. That's garbage nonsense. I didn't say anything at all. I used a bunch of second order abstractions to trick you. Everyone gets a vision in their head of what those things could possibly mean, and it's different for every person. And so you made a coherent story out of the incoherency that I just spewed, but it's not there. We have a very hard time recognizing incoherent stories. Why anybody listens to Brett Weinstein and James Lindsay about anything outside of their fields is beyond me. These guys are not coherent at all. At all. But I think our comprehension is so low, and we're so poorly trained in comprehension and so well trained in literacy and so ill-formed that we project our idea of what the person said into what the person said. At one point, James Lindsay is talking to Brett, and he says, "Oh, these people on the internet took something I said, modified the words, and treat it like it's the only thing I ever said." And I'm like, that happens to me several times a week, dude. This is the internet. Like, what are you a clown? What kind of statement is that? Does gravity hold you to the earth? Is the sun rising in the east every morning? Like, I don't understand. Like, right? And I'm just sitting there like, I've had on several occasions, and it's happened on live streams. You can watch some live streams and see this happen sometimes. I've had people try to repeat back my point and not use a single word that I used. Just say something completely different with no overlap whatsoever with what I just said. In the moment, live on a camera. Happens a lot. Why? That never used to happen in the old days on the internet. Never. Never, ever, ever. Also, there were many fewer people. The web wasn't a thing. All very smart people. All very astute people. They were very aware. So even the bad actors, and there were bad actors, they were very careful about when they were acting badly, we'll say, and who they did it around. And so they were good at hiding, which is okay. Like, hidden bad behavior is slightly better than bad behavior in public. But in the old internet, these were things. And in the new internet, you can't tell what people are saying. And so you project into it, and they sound like geniuses. And then when they blow up, because they have a fight with somebody else who you also agree with or whatever, or who was clearly right when they're clearly wrong about that issue, you don't know what to do. Because you're not part of a nation. If you're part of a nation, you know what to do. You know where you sit, and you know how to make the world a better place. Because your domicile would be solved. Unfortunately, to do that, you have to listen to someone. I recently tweeted out, you should all follow me on Twitter. I probably won't get it exact because I'm tired, but I tweeted out, everybody wants a solution to domicide, but nobody wants to be told where to be or what to do. Because that's the solution to domicide. And there isn't another one, by the way. You're not going to find your path or find your way. How do I know that? Because that was the mantra in the 70s, guys. It didn't work. I don't know what more evidence you need than the fact that it didn't work and we already tried it. But that's a good enough hint for me. They were talking about UBI on Rail Country Stream, which obviously just makes me insane. It's been tried. It's been tried more ways than you can possibly imagine. I guarantee you, there's white papers about the attempts to do UBI at the country scale, at the state level, at the city level, at the county level. All of this stuff has been tried multiple times. The result's always the same, and it's always for exactly the same reasons. And these Muppets want to do more of it. I'm like, guys, we know it doesn't work. I don't get it. It's been tried throughout history. That trick never works. Why do you think this is a good solution? Are you all lazy and don't want to work? Like, I don't get it. I seriously don't get it. Are you so, quote, empathetic, which is not a real thing, by the way, that you're so worried for other people that you want to solve this imaginary problem for them that they don't have to have, because they could just go work at McDonald's and ask, would you like fries with that, and have a happy life? I know people like that. Oh, I've been at McDonald's for 16 years. What? Really? That's amazing. I wish I was anywhere for 16 years. I didn't have a job past do more than a year anywhere. Oh yeah, I did a one contract for 3 years, 3.5 years. But yeah, I mean, job as an employee, no, 1 year max, max. These people, I've been at McDonald's for 16 years. What? That's awesome. I'm jealous. I wish I could be happy with, would you like fries with that? But that's not my thing. I'm not even good at that. So I get distracted too easily. When I'm bored, it's all distraction. It's over. I got to keep myself busy. I'm completely screwed. Completely screwed. So look, those are my thoughts on Nation. Doesn't look like anyone's going to jump in. I even remember to pin the link. Now I'm sad. No, I'm not sad. It'll be fine. I'm also pretty tired. I've been sick all week. It's been bad. So I think I'm going to close it down. I hope that helped you understand. I hope you'll be aware of these people who don't like nationalism. This is a problem. Granted, we have a bad definition of nation, and I've tried to clear that up here. I hope it helped. Right? We can just go back to the original definition. It's fine. And then admit the United States is not a nation. It's a federation of nations. That's fine. Fixes the problem well enough, we'll say. But nationalism is bad people. They were born into something, and they shouldn't be poo-pooing it that quickly. And they shouldn't poo-poo what you were born into either. That's just rude and obnoxious. It's bad behavior on their part, and you shouldn't tolerate it. You should be aware of those people because they're either crazy or stupid or both. Look, everybody, take care of yourself and take care of the people around you. And remember the most important thing. The world needs you to be better. The world can't get better unless you're better. And in order to have a world, you need to get better. That's just how it works. But it's that easy. You make yourself better and you improve the world. You don't need to worry about foreign wars. You need to worry about fixing the political system in your country or nation or federation of nations or whatever. You don't need to do that. You need to focus on where you're at and your family and the people around you. That's what you need to focus on. Don't focus on anything else. Just be better. And hopefully I'll get the Jordan Peterson Pragmatist Book Club going, 6-week extravaganza soon. And hopefully that will help you. If you have suggestions for times and stuff, leave them on the Market Wisdom Discord server or put them in the comments on this video, days and times. And I will consider those days and times. I have to redo all my research for that because I don't even remember what we came up with. I might do Sunday. I'm thinking it's Sunday. I like the Sunday book club. Kind of miss it. I might do Saturday, miss my Saturday book club. We'll see. So yeah, part 2 of Brett Weinstein and James Lindsay should be coming out tomorrow. And have a great week. Have a wonderful 4th of July. And celebrate the wonderful Federation of Nations that is the United States. Celebrate it whether you live here or not. See you next week, everybody.